Thanks for tuning in to the Proline Handicapping Show on the web. Coming up, the Spurs at the Rockets, Ohio State versus Michigan, Utah and BYU, and Michigan State taking on Wisconsin. But first, let's hear from our Proline panelists.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Proline. I'm Dave Koken, along with Scott Spreitzer and Glenn McGrew. We're going to be looking at some NBA and college basketball conference tournaments to talk about as they're underway. And got to mention RotoPlay right at the top of the show. Go to rotoplay.com if you're a fantasy player and you think you're really good at it. This is where you can actually win money playing fantasy sports. Get your own Roto team in a variety of different sports. College conference tournament action up right now, and a special 25% bonus set up where you can get a lot more play for your Roto bucks. So make sure and check it out at rotoplay.com. Guys, it is a fun time of year because the conference tournaments are here. Kind of the minor league championship week is taking place right now as they gear up for all the big leagues next week. I like the minor leagues in a sense better. I mean, I concentrate a lot on these conferences during the course of the season, and so far so good. So I'm looking forward to maintaining that all weekend long.
Yeah, we jumped out to a nice winning start with Eastern Kentucky the other night and won big. Yeah, and you know what I like about a lot of these smaller conferences, the mid-majors, is a lot of people, and you get good lines for this, a lot of people are still stuck in that mentality that a team in double revenge is the team to play on in the conference tournaments. And let me tell you, especially on these home sites, the team that won the two games during the regular season, most of the time, well, not most, but there's many angles where they can cover between 58 and 63% of the time over the past 5 to 6 seasons. So it's like everything else right now. The line maker makes the adjustment towards the public. Yep. The public's thinking they're in double revenge for the season. They're going to automatically win. And you can sit back and collect some real nice numbers from the line maker and make money.
You said it was a great time of the year. Well, it normally is for me too, but unfortunately, I'm sounding a little bit like Dave Koken Jr. today, and I don't know if somebody sabotaged me here, so I wouldn't talk so much on the show.
It would be senior.
It would be senior, wouldn't it? Yeah. Interesting point about these smaller conferences too. Of course, you get into the major conferences. A lot of times, the team that won the regular season isn't quite. They're not quite so focused to win the conference championship because they know they're going to make it into the tournament. But with these smaller ones, just because you won the regular season doesn't mean you're going to go to the big dance. You almost, in most cases, you almost have to win this conference tournament.
That's a major reason why you can't play the double revenge factor. You know, why it really switches up to these little, or not little, these low level or mid level, whatever you want to call them, conference tournaments, because that conference champion, as you just mentioned, they got to win that tournament to get to the title or to get to the big dance. So they come out and play their best.
Yeah, in other leagues, of course, you'll have situations where teams will, I'm not going to say relax, because I think all these teams want to win their conference tournaments, but it's imperative. It's less imperative for certain teams. I think we might see an example of that in the Mountain West, because the host team, UNLV, and BYU, the almost certainly conference champion.
Well, San Diego State's dangerous.
That's a dangerous ball club.
Well, they are, but I'm saying BYU and UNLV they're in.
Right.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant. Oh, okay.
Whereas
I
Air Force and San Diego State are two teams that are now going to have to.
I thought you said that those two teams were the ones who were almost certain to win the.
No.
I'm right. Saying I see what you're saying.
I'm not recommending by any means.
This sounds like that whole spider deal from Goodfellas. I thought you said it. You know, you said.
I hadn't said anything yet. So, San Diego State and Air Force are teams that now, and along with the other 5 teams in the conference, would all have to get something out of the tournament. I actually think, and we'll look more at this next week, but I actually think that San Diego State has to win the conference tournament now to get in. And Air Force, I think, has to win at least 2 games now to get in. Talk about a team that's letting it get away. And we were talking about this before we came on. You know, I'd like to see Air Force make the tournament because the system they play, if you haven't seen it, it's very difficult to get prepared for. And they could be a terrific buy as an underdog in the first round against somebody. But the teams in the Mountain West, they've got them figured out now. They've seen this thing 2 and 3 times, maybe even more, with experienced teams going back to last year, and Air Force is really struggling down the stretch.
When you get thumped by TCU, that means that teams are recognizing what you do. And they've won a lot of close games at home this year, and they were getting beat up pretty good on the road. And now they lose at home to BYU, a game that they were up 7 or 8 points at one point of the second half and couldn't hang on for the victory. But you're right. It's too bad that we don't have an automatic lock right now with Air Force getting into the tournament, because I think they would give somebody a lot of trouble with that crazy style they play, or not crazy, but Princeton-like. And also San Diego State. boy, if they get in the tournament, this is a team that if they're playing together as a team has a great shot at making it to the Sweet 16 if they land in the right region because of their athleticism and the skill that they have. By 3 or 4 players, at least 2 of them are going to be in the NBA next year playing for money.
They're loaded.
Yeah.
I got to say,
especially offensively, but this year, or not this year, the second half of the season, suddenly they figured out a way to play a little bit of defense too.
Yeah, but you know what? 2 of their last 3 games, they lose to Wyoming and they lose to Utah. You can't lose games like that. And I'm not a coach basher. I'm really not. I mean, but please, this San Diego State is clearly the most talented team in this league. They don't have an excuse, as far as I'm concerned, for losing this many games. Sure. The only knock on them that I can see is that they don't have much depth. But outside of that, I mean, their starting 5 is, without question, physically the most talented in the league, and yet they're going to finish 4th in the conference. Sure. That's not impressive.
And you got UNLV, who plays as hard as anybody in the league, night in, night out, with maybe the best coach in the league. Who can give teams trouble as long as they don't go up against a real talented big team. Yeah. BYU, to me, is when I look at them out in the Mountain West, I mean, here's the team that's at the top of the league standings. They scare me, though, because when they venture away from home, other than the win the other night against Air Force, boy, anybody can beat BYU on their home floor or on a neutral
better
court.
Lately, though. Had a good win at Utah where they never win. I mean, they hadn't won there in over a decade.
Well, let's face it, the Mountain West is no different than the SEC this year. A couple other conferences where it's very difficult to win a road game no matter who you're playing against.
Well, and you could run into it's really tough when you run into that revved up crowd too. Yeah. Florida found that out. Very flat performance to be sure at Tennessee, but I thought that was, by the way, one of the coolest things I've seen all year.
What's that?
With Pat Summitt coming out in the cheerleader's outfit and singing the Rocky Top song, and then putting whatever that hat she had on right on. Square on Dickie V's head, and he sat there and wore it. I mean, it was a great time. That's what college sports is all about, and to me, that's the difference. As to why I personally like college sports, got nothing to do with the handicapping, although I happen to be better in the colleges than I am in the pros. But I enjoy the college sports more than the pros because the college sports, they still let you have fun. Mm-hmm. The NFL, it's the no fun league. I mean, it's great theater, but it isn't a whole lot of fun.
You know, you talked about Florida also real quickly. That's, 3 out of the last 4 games, and they've come out and played a very flat performance. Yeah. I had Florida the other night, by the way. We've had a great run for the past 6 weeks, but Florida was not one of those winners. And flipping on the game, when I got a chance to get done doing some handicapping for the next day and flipped on the game and saw 33-19 midway through the first half or whatever it was, 6 minutes to go in the first half, and saw Noah sitting on the bench and had been sitting on the bench for most of the first half. And they came out in the second half and they were trying to play hard, but they were still way out of sync. I mean, this is a team that's trying the old let's flip the light switch on and off type of thing. Yeah. It's going to catch up to them. It has in the regular season.
I figure they'll get bumped out first game of the tournament.
Yeah. Well,
I don't think they'll
you know what I mean.
I do know. I'm just kidding.
I don't think they make a long run.
Well, we'll wait and see.
They've got the
talent.
talent to
Anytime
do
you've got a
it,
defending champion.
But they just haven't played well.
Well, no, they haven't. But every team goes.
It's not just flat; they're out of sync.
No,
I mean the best.
That's
all I think Dickie V was doing the game the other night, and that's all he had to say the whole night. That's all he needed to say. He said it once. This team's really out of sync, and that's all that needed to be said about Florida right now because, they're playing hard. I mean, it's not just that they were flat; they were playing really hard at the start of the second half, and it still took them 12 minutes of game time in the second half to get it going. So they did catch a little fire at the end, but
they are the target. They're going to be wearing that bullseye going into this tournament, and somebody's going to get them. I think they'll get to the Sweet 16 just based on their talent, but I got to tell you, they're going to have trouble getting any further than that.
If they find what it takes, if they find what they're doing 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they might win it all again. No doubt about it, Glenn. I totally agree with you there, but it's going to be tough to find that.
But it's a lot tougher to find it if you haven't been finding it.
Right. And they haven't for most of the last 4 games.
Certainly the one thing they had going for them, though, is that they lost 3 in a row late last year, too.
Yeah.
And then got hot at the right time. But I do think they really need to make some kind of a statement in the SEC tournament to indicate that they're ready to go. Point. Because if they have a bad tournament and get bounced out of their first or second game, I think that they're going to be an early casualty.
And don't get me wrong, this is one of the top 4 or 5 teams in college basketball where they're playing their game. Maybe one of the top 3 or 2 teams in college basketball when they're playing their game.
The best, yeah.
But the bottom line is will they play that game? As you mentioned, though, they kind of staggered their way down the stretch last year. But it's almost like this year. It's like I saw in the second half of that game before they kind of caught fire and they pulled within about 10. They looked like they were almost hitting the panic button, like what the heck's going on? I mean, if you saw
they were down 27 points in this game.
I think it was 67-40 at one point before they got it going. So
27. Yeah. The weird thing is, There were late rushes in the first game. It was Tennessee that made the late run because I had Florida for a big play in that game, and Florida was up 26 at the half, and I figured this is smooth sailing.
And they made the run without Lofton in that first game, too.
Yeah, and then they made a run and almost stole my money away from me that game. But I got there by a point, and that's
all it takes.
That's all it takes. The Spurs and Rockets going to be the first NBA game we look at. We're going to look at that game plus 3 good college matchups to talk about as well. All games with tournament implications. So stick around. Lots to come on this edition of Proline.
Up next, NBA action as San Antonio takes on Houston. But first, let's hear from Primetime's Glenn McGrew, who has been on a season-long heater in the NBA and is making available his Pro Basketball Game of the Year absolutely free this Saturday.
We got NBA action coming up in a second. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about last week. As Elvis was fond of saying, heartbreak hotel last week. Lost my ACC Game of the Year by a half point. Do you know the value of a half point? Boston College beating Clemson 59-54, unfortunately laying 5.5 points. But I tell you, I did once again capitalize on my 2 other biggest plays. An insider call on Nebraska, who beat Missouri, and of course a 25-star win with San Diego State over BYU. One of the rare losses for the Cougars in the last few weeks. And I tell you, my remarkable pro basketball run continued. Saturday, a big chalkboard winner with the Toronto Raptors, and this week it's my pro basketball game of the year. As if that wasn't enough, you're also going to get 2 bonus plays, and it's all free. Got a season-long rush in the NBA, up 183 stars on the year. Now my biggest release of the entire season, my Pro Basketball Game of the Year. Plus, when you call, you're going to get my College Dog of the Month and a Vegas Steam Game of the Week play. It's all on Picks Online right now if you want to spend $20, or call me free at 1-800-531-7069. All 3 plays, including my NBA Game of the Year, free. 1-800-531-7069. And now some NBA action, Dave.
Yeah, we got the Spurs taking on the Rockets. And San Antonio is looking like they have gotten very serious of late. They're playing well right now. The Rockets, they just lost to the Celtics. Yikes. Break up that team. Houston's, McGrady had to sit that game out. He had the flu, and Bonzi Wells played well, but still, it's cause for alarm when you start losing to Boston. The Spurs, these guys are almost the overlooked team in the NBA right now. And that, everything the talk is Dallas and Phoenix, and rightfully so, because they do look like, Dallas commented earlier off the air. They're no longer the Dallas without the D, Alice Mavericks. These guys are gritty and tough, and they're the best team in the league. The Suns play that nutty system of theirs. It's a gimmicky offense. I mean, you run the court and then pop a 3. You're not supposed to win in the NBA with that, but Nash is so good at running the show.
That's the
that
bottom
Phoenix
line.
is a very, very dangerous basketball team. But San Antonio, very quietly, is still there. I mean, it's not going to shock anybody if this team goes on a run come playoff time and manages to get to the NBA Finals. I don't think that would be a huge upset. And I think right now that I don't want to try and beat them in these big games like this against the Rockets, where we know they're the better team going in. Spurs is just a better team in Houston.
They are, and they're playing better basketball right now. Also an advantage here for the visitor, because they were playing at home on Friday night while Houston had to play in Denver. Another problem for the Rockets. It'll be their 3rd game in 4 nights. This team's had trouble for about the last month, of course. I mean, when you lose a big man like Yao Ming, I mean, let's face it, it's difficult for any team to rebound.
Well, how
from
far are you
that.
going to go with Juwan Howard?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
he gave him a lot of good games early when Yao Ming first got hurt, but he's kind of leveled off and is playing more like a guy who's kind of worn out at this point for all the minutes.
He has. And it's interesting, this series has been dominated by the visitor, too.
Yeah.
This year, 3-0 straight up and against the spread for the visitor. Go back to last year, 5-2 straight up. 6-1 against the spread. So the visiting team has won this one. And I'll tell you what, I'm sure that the Spurs will remember the last ball game. Houston shot 50% against them. And, of course, San Antonio, year in, year out, always one of the best defensive teams in the league. So a little added incentive there. Maybe the best defensive squad still overall in the league. And I think they come back and they get this one. I expect a pretty short number here, and I'm going to capitalize on that, I think.
You mentioned about for the postseason, about San Antonio and how they're now coming together after the All-Star break and really playing well. And have you guys noticed since Matt Bonner's starting to get healthy how much better Robert Horry is playing?
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to help out, obviously, in the playoffs. I mean, Robert Horry all of a sudden sees the writing on the wall that he better make some shots or he's going to be sitting on the bench. And he did one game after the All-Star break, never even played. So with Bonner coming back, he's going to be on top of his game. You can bet on that. But also for Houston, here's a team that Yao Ming, his endurance has been in question since he's come into the league. And he's going to be as rested as it gets when it comes to the postseason because when he comes back, as long as he's at least 90-95%, he can make some noise.
When's that going to be, though?
That's the problem.
Apparently, this knee brace thing isn't working out at all.
Right.
And he apparently is still quite a ways from returning.
Yeah. If he can come back, I'm going to say 2 weeks left in the regular season, and can get back on track a little bit, get his legs under him, he could definitely make a difference when it comes postseason this year.
If McGrady's able to avoid back issues.
His back issues.
Always a question.
His off-the-court
issues.
issues.
Houston. I mean, there's so many ifs on this team.
Well, that's the thing with McGrady this year. We haven't seen the big, long stretch of games where he misses for some reason or another, whether it's on the court with an injury or off the court with something personal. So we'll see if he can get through a second half of the season without flaking out or getting injured. But as far as this game is concerned, you talked about Houston playing at Denver on Friday night. That whole thing about a team playing at Denver and then going and playing the next day really isn't the blind play on that it used to be.
No.
And it hasn't been for many years. But one thing that is good, and I like to jump into this, I'm not a big angles guy, but if you look at Houston this year, now there's only been 4 times this season where it's happened where they play on the road one night and the very next night they play at home. They're 1-3 straight up and against the spread in that spot. San Antonio's perfect when they play back-to-back, playing home the first night and playing on the road the second night. They're 4-0 straight up. They're 3-1 against the spread. And the streak they've been on, this win streak they've been on, I mean, they're not even close against these teams they're playing against. Some serious blowouts mixed in. So I'm going to back the road team here. I'm going to keep going with that road angle between these two teams and grab the spot with the Spurs. I think they pretty much handle Houston without a lot of trouble, relatively speaking.
Well, we have a consensus. 3 calls on the San Antonio Spurs to get it done in their matchup against the Rockets. So we'll see if there's an agreement on the next game. We're going into the Big Ten. Ohio State, Greg Oden and company hitting the road to go into Ann Arbor and face the Michigan Wolverines off a big win against their arch rivals from Michigan State. That's next.
Coming up, Big Ten basketball with Ohio State and Michigan. But first, we'll hear from Smokin' Dave Koken, who is on a 9-2 Game of the Year run and has a guaranteed triple header of tournament action available this Saturday.
Okay, well, it's that time of year. This has been my best 2-week run over the last 3 seasons. 3 years in a row, these conference tournaments, wow, they've been extraordinary for me. I just tore it up last year, and I hadn't really been having a very good season last season, and then got extremely hot in the conference tournaments. This year, done a lot better with the big plays. In fact, been on a terrific run on these top plays. Going into this weekend, I've hit 9 out of 11 on these Game of the Year releases. Won my overall Game of the Year by a mile with San Diego State against Colorado State. Bracket Buster Game of the Year was a big winner with Wright State, and I've hit 7 of 9 conference games of the year. So that's a big run. Got off to a perfect 2-0 start with the conference tournament plays in the Ohio Valley Conference, Eastern Kentucky. Very easy against Morehead State. And Samford took them as a dog against Murray State, and Samford wins the game going away. The stuff I worked on evidently is just better in the postseason than it is in the regular season. I don't exactly know why that is, but I have a good idea. I think it's got to do with the fact that my numbers are more accurate come at the end of the year, and I can factor in certain scenarios that I think are to my advantage and come up with some really good plays. I've got 3 conference tournament releases on the Saturday schedule, and you can get them right now for just $25. The number's 1-900-835-9898 if you want to call on the phone, or you can just get them right here at the website. Now, they're guaranteed as well. All 3 games have to get the money, or you're going to get all of next week's championship week action plays right through the entire week at no cost whatsoever. So these are 3, I believe, what will be outstanding plays. I can't tell you what they are right now because the matchups aren't set, but trust me, the numbers are going to be strong that I have, and I'll come up with my 3 best plays and win them all guaranteed, or you get next week's big action free. 1-800, or 1-900, I should say, 835-9898, or just stay right here at the website and go to my Solid Gold Club on Saturday and check out those 3 big winners. Okay, Michigan. Tommy Amaker actually wins an important game on Tuesday as his team gets the best of Michigan State. It was a really entertaining game, too, and Michigan was the better squad in that game. They kept their NCAA tournament hopes alive. I think they need some help to get in, but had they lost that game, they'd have been toast. Ohio State, meanwhile, well, they sure look like they're going to be a number 1 seed. And, there's always a danger that they could maybe not be at their sharpest going into this game. Well, the Buckeyes are clearly a better team than Michigan and a much smarter team than Michigan, too. But I'm not saying they won't bring their A game here. I just don't know that they will. And I don't know, Michigan's going to come out fired up.
Let me toss this out at you guys real quick, because in some of the shows I do around the country, I've been asked this. What do you guys think of Mata as the head coach? Do you guys think that he's doing what he should be doing with this unit that has some serious talent on it? I know it's young, obviously, with Conley and
well, I got to tell you something. That man's in total control. If you did see what he did with that piece of gum last week. That was impressive. In less than 5 seconds, no less.
Under the 10-second rule,
That's a guy who's focused right there. No, I like Mott. I don't. And with Greg Oden on the floor, they can win the whole thing.
Well, they can win the whole thing. What's scary is that this team. Well, they're a public team, obviously.
Sure.
Do you know that this team, in games where lines are in single digits this year, they're 4-8 against the spread? They're 1-5, laying 1 to 9 points against the spread this season. Last Sunday, we took Wisconsin as our college basketball game of the month at Smash Mouth Sports, and we just looked at the line and said, "Wow, 4.5, 5 points." And obviously, Wisconsin went into that game with Brian Butch healthy, and thought, that's not a bad number, because when Ohio State is playing as a single-digit favorite, it seems like you can watch them, and they're always in control of the game, but they end up winning by 2 or 3 points. So we grabbed whiskey.
And that brings up an interesting question. Do they have the offensive firepower to go out and blow teams away?
That's why I think Mata's doing a good job, because they might not go out and win by 20 points, but they're always in control of 4 and 5 point wins, which is impressive from the coaching perspective.
Oden is such a smart player.
He is.
I can't believe he's a college.
He has yet to play a game out of context from the team.
Really?
Which amazes me, because he's so young and he's got so much hype and riding on his shoulders that this guy could come out and take 28 shots and nobody would blame him, but he still plays with them.
It's one of these guys, one of these kids that realizes that playing defense and rebounding is just as important as scoring, because he doesn't take a lot of shots.
He's a smart guy.
Yeah.
And he's just advanced beyond his years.
35, we said that before. Well, of course, he's very experienced.
But mentally as well. I mean, this guy looks like and plays like a guy who's been in the NBA for 5 years. And there's an issue for Michigan right there. The situation is really not that bad for the Wolverines here, but boy, what are they going to do with him?
Well, I'll tell you, they have 2 Courtney Sims, and then they've got a freshman kid, a 6'10" freshman kid that's like one of the leaders in the Big Ten in blocks. So they do have 10 fouls to work with. They've got 2 big men that they can throw at them. That helps them a little bit.
What's the other kid, Adair?
Yeah.
He's been a disappointment, but he can still come in.
Oh yeah, well he's very young. He's getting better. The other advantage, of course, is that 8-7 in the Big Ten. Granted, they did win their 20th game of the year, but with the Big Ten
the RPI is not that good though.
No, it isn't, and the reason it isn't is because the Big Ten, in the eyes of most people, it's not a real good conference this year, and it's probably not. So I think that if they lose this, they end up 500 in the Big Ten. They're 20-11. They don't have any big wins this year. But the closest thing to a big win would have been last week's or earlier this week, the win over Michigan State. But they got beat by like 16, 17 points at home to Georgetown. They got annihilated on the road at UCLA.
And
so they've got a couple of real bad wins.
How big the Michigan State win is.
Yeah, well,
because Sparty's been a little bit erratic this year. They're gonna get in.
Well, I wouldn't.
I think they're gonna get in. Their RPI is real strong. See, that's one thing is Michigan State's losses, as opposed to Michigan lost to some bad teams.
Big difference.
Michigan State's losses have been almost all to real good quality competition.
You can't tell me that Izzo's name doesn't draw some RPI rankings itself.
That's
I mean,
true.
the bottom line is, if they're on the bubble, they're going to get in, as far as I'm concerned, with Michigan State. When you look at that first game that these two played, by the way, Oden didn't have a big game. He was in early foul trouble. I think he finished with 14 or 15 points, but Conley went nuts. He had 23 in that game. It was his first real big game
Conley's
in a big
terrific
game setting, and he had a fantastic
Well, even in the Wisconsin
game,
Conley didn't have a great game until the end, and then he took over. I mean, the kid...
but it was a 13-point win by Ohio State. But, what was it? I wrote it down here to make sure I was 8 minutes to go in the game, they were only up by 4. Huh? If you remember that contest, it was close until the final 7 or 8 minutes of the contest. That's when Ohio State was able to come on a little bit. And for whatever it's worth, if you like bulletin board material, if you guys happen to see at the end of that game Ohio State doing the NIT chant directed at Michigan's bench, that's a little bit of bulletin board fodder. But anyway, it's tough to go against the Ohio State Buckeyes because they are so strong. But again, you're talking about a team that doesn't cover the spread in single digits. And you made a great point. This team can be a #1 seed without winning this basketball game.
Yeah, it's not the most important game.
And if they win by 1 point, that's all they really care about anyway.
So you got a home team, a division or a conference home dog that needs a win desperately. And this would, let's face it, a win here really would put Michigan in a pretty good spot.
Michigan
they
would
win this game, even if they, at least if they won one.
Gets another year.
Unless they would have blow out in their first
round
Big Ten game, and they're going to get they would. And
they'd
have to lose. Well, let me put it this way: they'd be in a situation where they'd be playing a bad team in the first round, I believe, because they won't get a bye, but they would be facing one of the lesser teams in the play-in round, if you will. I think all they'd have to do is win one game and they'd make it in. But I don't know if they can win this game. I'm staying out of it myself.
I think we all are. Yeah. So in other words, two in a row consensus.
Well, if you forced me and said who you're going to play, I'll say, well, I'll go ahead and take the points. But
if you forced me, I'd say just take the under. Because that's with Ohio State, that's fine by them.
Sure.
Well, next up, we're going to look at the Holy War, basketball style, right here in the Mountain West. Utah traveling to BYU. That's just around the bend.
Next up, Utah and BYU. But first, we'll hear from Scott Spreitzer, who is on a monster run the past 6 weeks, including an 80% run on his big game releases, and nothing is bigger than his guaranteed college game of the year, which wins this Saturday.
Welcome back, everybody. We're going to talk about Utah and BYU in just a moment. Let's talk about this second half college basketball season run that we've been on. It's been absolutely fantastic. We've always enjoyed conference play over non-conference play, but it's been ridiculous this year. Over 350 stars of profit in college hardwood play over the past 6 weeks. It includes a fantastic game of the year game of the year run, that is, Dave. 75% against the spread with those at 6-2. A fantastic game of the month run, 23-9 with those. Main event run has been fantastic. Last Saturday we cashed another main event as Butler crushed Detroit. We had Nebraska as our 25-star insider, just win after win after win. And today, folks, I'm releasing my biggest play of the entire season. It is my 2006-07 college basketball game of the year. So confident about this side that we are going to guarantee the rest of the season, including all of the big dance, as part of this package. $25 for the game of the year and the guarantee. All you have to do is call 1-800-521-1872. You can also get it here online beginning on Friday night. 1-800-521-1872. Guys, Holy War Part 2, it's BYU and Utah.
Part 1, Utah actually losing at home to BYU, which is something that hadn't happened for many, many years. BYU, of course, has had a reputation that's they've lived up to it. A great team at home and not very good on the road. Well, they've still been great at home again this year. They've been better on the road lately. This one is at home. BYU has the nation's longest home court winning streak. BYU wins the Mountain West Conference outright if they win this basketball game. Actually, it's conceivable that they may have already clinched.
They have clinched a tie, they've also clinched the #1 seed.
If UNLV lost to New Mexico, which we don't know as we're recording this, then it's possible that BYU would have already wrapped up the conference outright now. And that's where this becomes, to me, a very interesting handicap. I don't think there's any way to make a good call on this game without knowing what happened with UNLV and in New Mexico. I will tell you this. If it's a game, assuming UNLV went in and beat New Mexico, they're going to pump this line up because the obvious incentive for BYU, plus that phenomenal home court winning streak, the home-road dichotomy that BYU has, you'll have to pay the price to play BYU in this game. They may get there anyway, but I can tell you one thing, regardless of the situation, whether it's a big game for BYU or not, it will be a huge game for Utah. There's no game Utah wants more than this one on their schedule because they lost at home. They know they're not going anywhere this year. The one thing they'd love to do more than anything is end BYU's home court winning streak. I think you're going to get a big effort out of Utah regardless of the situation here. I don't know if that's enough to get me to play him.
Yeah. Well, but
I do know that hopefully UNLV, not just because I'm a UNLV fan, hopefully UNLV beat New Mexico, so this is a double-figure number. And that may get me enough leeway to go ahead and take a shot with the Utes.
Yeah. It's similar a little bit in the last game we talked about, although Ohio State outright clinched the Big Ten title here. BYU, no matter what happens to them or UNLV, they have at least a tie. They at least tie UNLV. They'd have the #1 seed regardless of what happens here. So a little less incentive for them. And as you said, Utah, this is their game
why
every
would
year.
they have the #1 seed?
It's already been determined.
I still haven't figured that out.
I don't know. I don't know why, but I know it was announced yesterday. So, but in any case,
that's weird.
Well, the best UNLV can do is tie them, and of course they split their 2 games. So I don't know what the next quote tiebreaker is. I guess I don't know. But anyway, Utah, like you said, a big game for them. And I'll tell you what, they don't think they're going anywhere. They're not a good enough basketball team to think really big. But still, they don't want to play in the play-in game in this conference, which, of course, is between the 8 and 9. Currently now, with a nice comeback against New Mexico, Utah moved into 7th place. So they'd like to stay there. I think they'd like to avoid playing that
Actually,
opening
got a 2-game
game.
winning streak.
Two games
Because they
in a row.
did
That's right.
they beat San Diego State and played well in that game.
That's right.
The other night on Tuesday. So,
But it's again, you're talking about such a discrepancy in
you think,
talent here. How difficult.
You think Giacoletti's going to be back? They're really unhappy with him in Utah. I mean, it's only his 2nd year, and generally coaches don't lose the job after a second year. But
2 years.
the attendance is down, way down. I mean, they have not drawn well this year.
And it isn't a program that was down
used to
before he
winning.
came in here. Exactly.
This is a big-time winning program. I mean, Utah's a team that was not that far removed from playing in the national championship game. And, of course, they got used to some big things with Rick Majerus. And I don't think the last year was, it was a transition year, but I think this team's been a big disappointment this year. They were picked 4th or 5th in the conference and never really came close. Neville has not developed. Johnny Bryant's been good, but Johnny Bryant's going after this year. I mean, what's going to be there next year for Giacoletti? It's he could use a win in this game.
Shows the worth of Rick Majerus and how much a coach means, because how do you recruit? That's a tough place to recruit. Bottom line, it's basically for anybody in the East Coast or Southeast or places like that. This is out in the middle of nowhere. And so I don't know. Giacoletti, I think he'd give him one more season. I really do.
Well, there are programs that it's amazing. Some of the programs in the country not sitting in the best of situations. It's always a shock to me that Washington State, who's had a pretty nice run this year, how they can keep recruiting, bring in some players too. Because
did they recruit them?
Well,
they were picked to finish at the bottom of the Pac-10.
Yeah,
and look where they are.
That's a good point. But I mean, and it's believe me, anybody that's been to Pullman, it's not exactly the. It's not exactly Madison, Wisconsin.
And speaking of Madison, Wisconsin, what a segue.
That's right.
Wow.
That's right.
Just because Glenn McGrew said that, we will talk about the game in Madison, Wisconsin.
Well,
Michigan State in Wisconsin. The Spartans off a loss, the Badgers off a loss, and we'll match them up right after this.
Up next, Michigan State and Wisconsin. But first, a reminder that world champion handicapper Jim Feist has a free triple header this Saturday, including an easy TV winner and a pair of best bets featuring Jim's small conference tourney dog of the year. All free when you call toll-free to 1-877-JIM Feist. That's 1-877-546-3347. Make the call.
Check out that number on the screen right now. World champion handicapper Jim Feist with 3 outstanding plays, and they're all free of charge. So make sure and take advantage by calling the toll-free number and get yourself a big 3-0 from Jim. Okay, let's go to Badgerland, where they're going to have to go the rest of the way without Brian Butch, who had a tough injury last week, and he is probably done for the year, I would guess. They will be hosting Michigan State and Spartans. I think they're probably in the NCAA tournament, but I suppose it's possible if they were to lose, having lost to Michigan, if they were to lose this game and then get knocked off somehow in their first Big Ten tournament game, maybe they could find themselves in the bubble. I think their RPI is good enough to get in anyway, but nevertheless, and because I thought the Indiana win got them in, to tell you the truth. This is still a really tough assignment for them. Wisconsin still steamed up about the Ohio State game, which they thought they should have won. Very tough at home, playing to protect at least a 2, and which I think is safe. But they still think they've got a chance to get to a 1, and they would. And now they, if they can win this game and win the conference tournament, and now they have to prove to themselves and to everybody else. They can go out and win it without their at least their big man on the inside.
Oh, but I mean, this guy was their leading rebounder. Excuse me, their number 3 scorer.
He's had a heck of a year.
Not only can he play inside, though, but he can go outside and shoot the 3, so it makes it very difficult for teams to defend. By the way, the reference to Madison, of course, I went to school back east, but I moved out to Milwaukee, and of course, here I am, 23, 24, and we used to take our road trip up to Madison, be up all the college girls up there, because that was probably the wildest party school.
How'd you get up, really, back then, even then, when you had to go ride on horseback? To go from one place to another?
Stagecoach, yeah. But in any case, it's a tough break for Wisconsin. This team really had a good shot at a number 1 seed. I mean, with the problems that Florida's having, North Carolina's lost a game or two. So this is a team that really had an excellent chance to be a number 1 seed and a basketball team I enjoy. I like a lot of running and shooting. I mean, let's face it, watching like a Phoenix Suns team, but or in colleges, teams that like to run up and down the floor, score a lot of points. Wisconsin doesn't do that, but they play so well. They've got a great coach there, a guy that can recruit and coach, one of those
classy
rare
guy too.
Boy, yeah,
what a good guy Bo Ryan is. I mean,
but this is a tough spot. Michigan State had won 4 in a row till they lost that game earlier this week to Michigan. They're playing better defense now, so it's a.
In Michigan State, I got to tell you, I mean, I had Michigan in that game. If Drew Neitzel's healthy in that game, it might have been a different story.
Maybe. Yeah.
He was under the weather. Wasn't even in the game late when they needed him out there. It was still a contest at that time, and he just couldn't make it. He'll be fine for this game, I would imagine. And I think this is going to be a heck of a battle.
When Glenn used to go to Madison to pick up the girls, he used to, instead of bringing a bouquet of flowers, he'd bring a plate of cheese. And used to work for him. But anyway, as far as this game is concerned, moving on quickly, you mentioned the Brian Butch injury, and what a shame. They have nobody big that can really come in and fill his spot. They got the kid Chappelle, who's 6'11", but he's playing 14, 15 minutes a game, 3 points, 3 rebounds a game. And it really makes you wonder what Landry and Krabenhoff are going to do now, because these two both go 6'7", but they're tweeners. They're big guard, small forward type of guys. They're not going to be able to change up their style of play to be able to make up for what they lose, inside on the glass, especially as you mentioned, Glenn. And the thing when I'm looking at the meeting between these two earlier this season, Brian Butch was healthy. They were still out rebounded 41-24. Yeah. And the Spartans know how to pound the glass and get the rebounds, and I think that's what probably puts them over the top here. There's one caveat, but of course Brian Butch was a part of this. It is Whiskey's best situation. They've been off since last Sunday, and when this team has 3 or more days to prepare for a game, they're 15-1 straight up this year, 9-4 against the spread. So I think Bo Ryan knows what he's doing. But man, what a shame! I mean, you're finally named number 1. I think the first time in school history that your men's college basketball team is ranked number 1. You go out, you lose 2 in a row, and you lose such a key cog to what's made it happen in Brian Butch. But I'm going to lean with Michigan State here. I think they've got a lot more to play for. Obviously, Wisconsin's going to have a high seed. That brings up another point, though. There's been talk over in years past that when a team maybe struggles a little bit down the stretch, even if they're one of the top 4 or 5 ranked teams in college basketball, and they lose their star player, the selection committee tends to drop that team from number 1 down to number 2 without blinking an eye.
Butch isn't a star player.
Well, I know, but he's such a key cog.
He's very important. Yeah.
They've got like 3 star players.
The committee has admitted that when you lose a player, it's almost like they're going to say, we can assume they're going to go down. Well, that's the correct thing to do.
Kenyon Martin, that was the most glaring example of it. Cincinnati.
With a team that was clearly the best team in the nation.
With him.
At that time. Yeah, that's what I mean.
And he gets hurt, and they knock him down to a number 2 seed, and they got knocked out in the second round.
Sure.
So, it does make a difference. Yeah, I think Wisconsin could have trouble, even if they would have won the Big West, the Big Ten tournament, could have trouble getting to a number 1 seed.
They could win the Big West without a doubt.
Well, even Big West,
I think they'd be favored.
But we've had 3 really excellent college basketball, 3 excellent college basketball games we talked about, important contests, and of course you folks like to talk about the big name teams. I'm sure, although once in a while some of your favorite smaller squads we bring in a team from the Missouri Valley or somewhere. But 3 difficult contests we've talked about here because of factors, teams that maybe are better but have clinched a title, or in this case an injury. So
none of these will be my game of the year.
No,
by the way.
And that's why you need to make the call.
By the way, your game of the year. Matter of fact, I'm going to have to get you to let me know what that game is, because that would make one heck of a parlay. $25. Your game of the year in college basketball, my pro basketball game of the year. That would make a nice little 2-team.
Yep, you're right about that.
You guys want my my 3
We're not going
names
to
too?
kiss, if that's what you mean. No.
At least not, never mind.
Your 3 place, that's a 5-teamer, though. I don't think I've ever won a 5-teamer. Or I don't think
Really?
I've ever been a 5-teamer, no.
Never?
No.
Not even going back to when you first started playing back in high school? Stuff something like
I'll
that?
take 5 of his players.
I have bet a few 3-team parlays, but only in baseball on run
I
lines.
thought everybody, like the first time they played, I'm going to circle like 8 teams on this parlay card.
No, not me.
I remember it well. I was in the 2nd grade.
I didn't myself. I never put, because I was basically told it's like, look, we make money off the people who circle 8 teams on the cards. It's the people who circle 3 that you're sometimes going to worry about. All right, we're going to come back with our best bets on this week's show and kind of recap what's going on this weekend, so stick around for that.
Coming up next are Proline Best Bets, the biggest selection from today's show.
All right, for my best bet, we're going to ignore all those tough college hoop contests we just finished talking about. I'm going to go to the one NBA game we discussed, and I'm going to take the San Antonio Spurs on the road at Houston. That's San Antonio, my best bet selection. And speaking of pro basketball, it's my game of the year this Saturday. You give me a call right now because you're getting it free, and making it even sweeter, you're going to get 2 bonus plays. You're going to get my college dog of the month, and you're going to get my Vegas Steam game of the week. All 3 contests highlighted by my pro basketball game of the year right now free at 1-800-531-7069. That's 1-800-531-7069.
Going with the San Antonio Spurs also. I think it's a great spot against Houston in this one. And talk about great spots. First of all, this is a fantastic end of the season Saturday card, guys, in college basketball. And you already know about our run, 350 stars of profit in college hoops over the last 6 weeks. We're going to continue the run on Saturday, and why not? We've got a game that we've located that becomes our game of the year for the 06-07 season. Biggest release of the entire year goes today. It's available right now for just $25 at 1-800-521-1872. You can also get it online beginning Friday night about 10 o'clock Eastern. And folks, it comes with a guarantee. You must win my game of the year or the rest of the season right through the big dance. March Madness will be yours on the house at White Hot Smash Mouth Sports. Give me a call, 1-800-521-1872. My big game of the year in college basketball goes this weekend.
I'm going to chime in with the Spurs as well. A rarity for me to go in an NBA game for the best bet, but why not? It looks like a good side to me, so I'm going along with the guys on that one. Don't forget rotoplay.com if you're into roto action, fantasy sports. There's no better way to play because you can actually, get more than a pat on the back if you do well at this or some goofy little trophy. You can actually win money, and there's a terrific special right now. You can pick up some extra roto bucks, so check them out at rotoplay.com. Don't forget to check out the website, by the way, for my free play on Saturday. Those have been rolling lately, and we'll have a good special offer on there. But the special offer I want to tell you about is for 3 conference tournament guaranteed winners. All 3 games have to get there, or you get all my action plays for next week's championship week action completely free of charge. Make sure and check it out at 1-900-835-9898. For some reason, I cannot memorize that number. I have to look at the little sheet down there. Or you can just stay right here at the website and get my Solid Gold Club plays for Saturday and get that guaranteed 3-0. We had fun talking about these games. Next week, we're going to get in-depth with some conference tournament action, so you want to make sure and check back for another edition of Proline. For Glenn and for Scott and for Jim Feist and for all the guys behind the scenes, I'm Dave Koken. Enjoy the weekend, everybody. See you next week.
Thanks for watching us this week, and be sure to catch Proline on the web next weekend, available Friday nights for more great insight.